Welcome to the Seriously Social podcast with your host, Simone Douglas. Our guest this episode is Elizabeth Williamson, who works as a relationship and family therapist. She and Simone chat about listening, learning through failure, and about dealing with conflicts and difficult conversations.
So welcome to today's episode of the Seriously Social podcast. I am very happy to be joined today by Elizabeth Williamson from Elizabeth Williamson Solutions. Thanks very much for coming in.
My pleasure.
So Elizabeth, maybe for our audience to start off with, can you just give us a little bit of the story of how your career started and where you found yourself now?
Well, it's been a curious journey. So I'm a social worker, and I'm a 60s child. Mm-hmm. So I was a single child in the 60s when that didn't exist. So families and relationships always were very curious for me. They didn't make sense. My family's pretty weird. And I've never thought I'd be a counsellor, which is what a lot of the work I do now. Yeah. And I don't like conflict, but I'm actually really good at getting in the middle of it. Okay. So I've learned a lot from my mistakes, and that's sort of my mistakes have led me towards saying, I'm never going to be a counsellor, and then finding it's what I do, it's my state of flow, if you like.
Yeah, nice.
And then finding out that counselling is all about difficult conversations, difficult people, our difficult internal experiences, and that led me to get really interested in how to resolve conflict. Mm-hmm. So I now work a lot with helping people who have difficult people in their lives or need to have those difficult conversations that we avoid. Yeah. Or organisations that need to deal with difficult circumstances or difficult environments, difficult people. So that's my world now.
You'd be in very high demand currently, I would have thought.
I've found that I really love working with families. I do a lot of couples work, and I had the privilege of studying directly with John and Julie Gottman, which is my masters. Yeah. I spent 3 years studying with them, and I think I feel like I've learnt at the feet of masters, some of whom are academic and well known, and some of the people that I know, and I watch them because I go, how do you do that? Because you do that so well, and I just copy.
Yeah, I think that's often, how we learn best is by observing people who seem to, just be exceptional at whatever it is that they do.
And what we struggled, when you struggle to learn something, you really have to learn it.
Yeah.
So on the back of many of my errors come my strengths.
Yeah, no, that absolutely makes sense. I think many, many years ago I used to be very conflict avoidant, maybe in my 20s. So my answer, instead of having conflict, was just to yell or to go, no, you will do this because I'm your boss, off you go. Yeah. Which, of course, doesn't help anyone in the long run. But I think, too, one of the things that I'd be curious about is once I worked out how to have positive conflict and useful conversations that were still difficult and uncomfortable, I still, as a leader for a very long time, had the reputation from an outsider looking in as being very difficult to deal with. And if you were inside my team and part of my team, the exact opposite was true. So, the team would say, no, her expectations are really clear. We know exactly where we stand. We know exactly how to communicate and what's involved. But because I would actively go into bat for my team with people higher up the food chain, their perception was she's really difficult and she's hard and she wants her own way. And, so do you think that there's how do you get to that happy medium where you're not so concerned with other people's perceptions because you know yourself what it is that you're doing?
Do you reckon there's a bit of gender bias in that as well?
Quite a bit.
Because I think women who are assertive and clear and succinct in their approach are seen as difficult, and men who do exactly the same thing are seen as direct and competent.
Well, that's
and I think that's one thing. I have a program that I really love delivering, which is for women, which is Step Up, Speak Up, and it's how to do exactly what you're saying, step up and deal with the reaction that you get, because it's often going to be reactive.
Yes.
And if you're prepared for reactivity and you know what to do, rather than often what we do is we mirror what we see or we complement it. So if you mirror it, you start to get reactive. in your own response. And if you're complimentary, you get very defensive.
Yeah.
And that doesn't work either. Over-explaining.
Yeah, too much detail.
And of course, you give ammunition away to anybody else by giving them too much detail.
Look, and I think absolutely in my 20s I did that. Like I used to manage pubs for ALH groups, so it was a really big hotel chain, and I was one of only 2 female venue managers at the time, and in my 20s. And so whilst I would get really good results, it was absolutely, I would defend my position to within an inch of its life because I felt like I had to, which was obviously an internal driver. But, you know, if I knew my area manager was coming out to have a meeting with me and they wanted to talk about budgets and performance, number one, they would tend to like pick on the tiniest thing that had slightly gone pear-shaped as opposed to going, well, actually you smashed your sales budget and you made the bottom line profit. But they'd go, so this one line here where you've gone over in your expenses, that's unacceptable. But I'd also find they would bring reinforcements. So they wouldn't come and see me all by themselves. They would bring like another area manager or somebody else with them to sit down. And it took me a while to figure out that they were intimidated by someone that was just in charge of their own world kind of thing.
There's a really lovely book by, I think it's Heifetz, and I can't think of the guy's name, Levsky, I think it is, and it's called Staying Alive Through the Dangers of Leadership. And it's a fantastic analysis of if you're a values-driven leader, which you sound like you were, were then, and are in your 20s, you're learning how to do it.
Yeah, I'm still figuring it out.
I mean, the 20s are about being clumsy, aren't they? Yeah. We just got to be graceful in hindsight about the 20s. But it's about the tactics that work within organisations to derail values-driven leadership because you know that's adaptive leadership, and people who want to protect their positions or their power are particularly will find strategies, and one of them is to fault find, and one of the skills is to know how to bring the conversation back and go, how do I going to manage this? You don't lead, I do. But again, it takes a bit of coaching and support to learn. And failing enough times to learn, this isn't working, I've got to do something different.
And I think too, like I said, in your 20s, you're still learning to trust your own judgment to a degree, and figuring out how to be a good people leader.
And we can... I think we're so driven in our culture about very binary thinking, right, wrong, good, bad, success, fail, that we miss and we don't teach really flexible thinking skills. So that, one of my rules, if you're stuck with only either or, looking at solutions for problems, then I know you're in the wrong place. It's when you're about the 5th creative solution, so you start with, well, either I do this, it'll work, or that'll fail, and that I don't want to do, and you get about the 5th one, then you get some creative thinking happening.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's what good conflict skill management's all about. It's getting that broad perspective and creative thinking to go, I could see this from a different angle.
Absolutely.
What is happening for this area manager that is so frightened that you could do, that will just manage that for him. Yeah. Because he doesn't know how to do it. Yeah. He has to bring in a reinforcement.
Well, no, and it's funnily enough, I went to my mum, who's a psychotherapist, and I got some advice because I'm like, this is just painful. Number one, he seems to feel the need to come and visit me every week, which is like not normal and distracting from what I'm trying to do. And number two, it never goes well. And so, she suggested that I start reaching out to him at least once a week and asking for advice on something. And it was like the smallest little thing, but I'd ring him up and I'd be like, hi, I'm just in the middle of doing some forward planning on my labour models, and, I've had a look at X, Y, and Z. And I'm just wondering, what are your thoughts around, permanent part-time versus casual in the labour mix? Do you think that there's an opportunity there for saving, or is it something I shouldn't waste my time on? And, they'd always have an opinion. I'd be like, thanks, that's actually really informative. I'm going to go away and integrate that into what I'm doing. Yeah. It took about 3 months, but then eventually they just stopped visiting me. They were like, I'm just going to leave Simone to do her stuff.
Yeah, I think there's an empathy that we really need to bring to conflicts and to relationships. Yeah. And I think that skill... what I love teaching is, I've got a table here and I try and get people, like a play, where are the characters in the story, and can you imagine each person's motivation and need? and see it from their point of view as well as your own. So you're trying to work on your own blind spot. He obviously needed to get to know you very well, but he needed to feel like he was leading you.
Yeah.
And he was just intimidated by your competence. And so once you reassured him that he was really important, and, probably spoke that masculine ego about giving advice,
absolutely.
he could relax. But we often struggle to do that.
Yeah, well, and I think, the default position too is like, stop picking on me. Like, and just piss off and leave me alone. But I think too, there's that, you can have conflict positive conflict without confrontation.
Absolutely. I love that term. That's actually what term that I use. I've got a 6-step model that I've developed about working through conflict, because I think we need to be, see conflict as a positive human experience. It drives us to change. Yeah. It's inevitable. It's transformative. And if we're confident and careful, empathic and courageous, we make wonderful things happen.
Absolutely.
And when we avoid it, we entrench fear.
And in doing that...
And anger.
Yeah, businesses constrict, teams disassemble.
So I have this philosophy of, making more peace one conversation at a time.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
That's cool. Yeah. So when you look at in terms of, say, you're going into like a business or an organisation to look at their models for conflict, I suppose, and how they do that, and dealing with difficult people, what are some of the simple things that, say, a business owner or a manager can do, not in the conversation itself, but in preparation for the conversation? What are some of the things?
I worked with a really large recreational organisation, right? Who had they have staff who are skillful, and they've got lots of junior staff doing the sort of walking around and managing people in the pool, or so they had to really skill up. So, and I think it's really important to work with leaders first. So one of the things we really worked with them on was to get a shared language, which meant that, and everyone took responsibility for stress. So you couldn't have a tantrum because you were stressed. You couldn't avoid something because you were stressed. But it was the managers and leadership responsibility to help you manage your stress. And then you had a personal responsibility to manage that yourself. So sharing that. So that gave people room to talk about difficult things. And confide in and coach more. One of the things that sometimes it's so simple. What the staff on the floor gained was the ability to say really confidently, I'm sorry, but this is our policy. I understand you're disappointed, but this is our policy and this is how we'll proceed. And because they had this really simple script
to follow,
and they knew that would work up the food chain, they just reduced their conflicts significantly. And it was simple. So there's a lot of stuff to get there, but it was really it's also understanding that about 10% of the population are conflict driven, so they won't cooperate. And once you recognise, 10%, that's a significant number.
It is a significant number.
You need to be skillful in dealing with them. And they won't respond to your, general skills and general approaches to trying to resolve something. So you have to be able to calm them down or manage them without getting agitated yourself.
Well, and it's funny you say that because, certainly my business partner in a couple of my businesses, he and I are very similar. We're both quite dominant alpha personality types, and we had to come up with this shared language because we found that we were arguing for hours about something that was like, and then we get to the end of the conversation and go, okay, so now we've both actually been saying exactly the same thing. It's just you want me to say it your way and I want you to say it my way, but we both agree ostensibly. So now we just say to each other, is this one of those hills? At which point, he'll go, no, it's not one that I need to die on. And I'll be like, okay. Or he'll go, yes, actually it is. I'm like, okay, so, if it is one of those hills that you need to die on, can you now explain to me what it is about it that makes it a hill?
And it is about learning how to discuss compromise, isn't it? Because what you're really doing is saying, here's something here's my edge. It's about boundaries. Which is another thing I love to coach people about. Here's a boundary I can't cross because something really fundamental or important is, is that I need to either defend
Yeah.
or would cost me something.
Yeah.
And here's where I'm negotiable. And often what we're doing in discussions is learning where that edge is. And as we get closer to it, we get more anxious,
Yeah.
more defensive.
And we tend to dig our heels in, yeah.
Yeah, dig your heels in because you don't want to go there.
Yeah.
So learning about that as you've done with your partner means you can give a clue. It's great to give a clue. Hey, this is getting into this territory where we're both going to have to be a bit more aware of what the conversation cost us.
Yeah.
And we might need to slow down a bit. We might need to pause and go,
Yeah.
why is this,
Yeah.
so edgy for me?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then find a way of talking about that. And many people just don't have that skill and haven't been taught it.
Well, yeah, because we don't get taught it, and in business school they don't teach it.
No.
They teach old school negotiation 1-on-1, or it's really funny actually. My now 13-year-old, when he was 7, read the book, because just like here, I have a bookshelf at home full of business books. One of them is called How to Get What You Want Without Having to Ask. So it's like effective negotiation. I think it was written, I forget when. That was his bedtime reading when he was 7, because he took it off the bookshelf. He was adamant that this is what he wanted to read. And so, I said to him, okay, that's fine. So we'll read a chapter a night, and then we'll have a conversation about how that might apply in your life, because obviously it's going to be about business examples and asking for a pay rise and God knows what else.
Well, pocket money's important.
Well, yeah, it is very much. But so he's in the Steiner stream at Trinity Gardens, and he has this teacher, Helen, who's amazing. And I said to her, we're about 3-4 days into this, and I thought, maybe I should give her the heads up. And so I said, Helen, just letting you know, Hunter is, this is what we're doing for bedtime reading. You may find he uses language that's not consistent with a 7-year-old's vocabulary. If you have any questions at all, let me know. She goes, that would explain why he asked if we could have a conversation about what a win-win outcome would look like if he undertook the classwork that I asked him to do yesterday. And I was like, good job, buddy. But, that model is not, whilst that, I think we've come a long way. That's very basic, prescriptive negotiation techniques, really it was. But, when are we going to teach people effectively?
So I think, it's historical. We are the generation after a generation that, lived through sort of Vietnam, lived through the Second World War, the First World War, and we are, I think, if you think about time, we are in the present, the future, and the past now. Yeah. And most families are still working with models that are 50, 70 to 100 years old, particularly around trauma. If you think about relationship skills, because we do what we know.
Yes.
Until we have to learn something different, and we do it unconsciously. So we approach difficult conversations, difficult situations with our history, and we rarely think forward very far into the future. What will the longer term consequences of this be? Because we're trying to get a quick solution because we're so uncomfortable.
It's like, make it go away.
You make it go away, or you're responsible. You fix it for me.
Yeah.
It's not my fault.
Yeah.
You fix it. Or if I say exactly what I think and I blow up, it'd be like a movie. You'll go, thank you for that criticism. You pointed out my flaws. I'm now going to stop doing that. So, we proactively rehearse failure, which is why it's really important to learn to that. Actually, with couples, with organisations, with leadership, we go into a conflict. We do exactly what we did last time. Yeah. You can predict it won't work.
But you still do it.
And we work with negative confidence. We predict it. So confidence is a skill. It's not an emotion. Yeah. So it's predicting with reasonable success the outcome of your actions. And negative confidence is predicting with reasonable accuracy that this is going to fail. So we avoid conflict So what I like to teach is positive confidence, like positive conflict. Yeah. If I do this and this, it's likely to lead in the direction that I want. Yeah. So in conflict, you have to know what you want. And you have to know what's reasonable to want rather than just dominating or being submissive or giving up what's important that you shouldn't give up.
Yeah. And that's, I think, quite complex for most people, because we're, particularly as women, I think, we're taught not to ask for what we want.
One of the problems, I think, culturally for women is we ask what we don't want because we're not allowed to ask what we want. So we negotiate from, look, I don't want this and I don't want this and I don't want this, and can you stop doing that?
Yeah.
And I spend a lot of time coaching women to say, so what is it, and actually people, what is it that you want? And people struggle.
Yeah.
Like in a mediation, people really struggle. What is it you really want? What is important? Well, I don't want this.
No, I didn't
I'm
ask
not having conversations you don't want. If I don't want to go to Victor Harbour, that does not help me tell you where to go, where to drive me. So what is it that you want? And we don't spend enough time with the discomfort of working out what it is, because we're caught up in the emotion.
Yeah.
And we're driven much more with that than we're thinking, well, also, what do I want that might be useful for everybody?
Yeah, exactly.
As opposed to just me.
Yeah. What's actually going to contribute to a rich life around me? Or to the richness of people. And our relationship continuing in a way that I want, in a way that you want. Or if you're very difficult, I need to manage you in a way that's possible. Yes, is the other option. I think I find that interesting in that with the Duke of Brunswick, for argument's sake. So we're very strange. And I like it that way because I'm very clear about, and when Alex and I took on the pub, I was really clear that I want to do all the things that I was told I wasn't allowed to do in pubs because it wouldn't make me any money. And I wanted to do them back then, 13 years ago, but wasn't allowed to. So let's have 100% gluten-free menu. Let's teach the staff how to, speak conversational Auslan so that deaf people can get communicated to in their own language.
That's fantastic.
We're actually Adelaide's only deaf-friendly pub.
That is fantastic. I mean, I live with a disability, but I'm also on the board of Access to Arts.
Okay.
So, we're always looking for accessible opportunities. That's fantastic.
Take the accessibility and inclusivity thing just as a community as a whole.
It's hugely important.
Yeah, it really is. But, apparently it doesn't make you money. It seems to make me some money, so that's fine. But what I worked out too is that by embracing all human beings, so we have this story with the Duke of Brunswick, which is the outside world doesn't matter here. And so that's, the staff, the minute they walk through the door, that's their one job, is to make the customers feel like they've stepped into this safe space where who they are is enough. So you have an
ethos.
Oh, absolutely.
And not enough businesses can actually, I think that's genius.
Yeah.
So, and that's one of the things that I like to work with is what is the ethos of your business, because value statements are generic and boring and nobody gets them. Everyone wants to be honest and reliable and accountable. But, when you can put the ethos of your business into a statement that people are accountable for, that is imaginative, you ask people to actually embrace it.
Yeah.
It's fantastic. I love it.
Yeah, so they help tell the story. And
we're storytellers.
we are.
That's what conflict is about, isn't it?
Yeah.
When you tell a story about conflict, you are the centre hero of your conflict story.
Yeah.
Or you're the victim.
Yeah.
And you've got to get past that. And we get to actually choose. And everyone has that story and they're all competing.
Yeah, absolutely.
So to have this thing to come in where, the outside world doesn't matter and here is just right for you.
Yeah. And so, we have this thing that who you are as a human being is absolutely okay, just as you are. And so it creates a really nice work environment for everybody as well. But I think what you were saying about being the hero of your conflict story is a really great thing to end on. What do you find, so with the people that you start working with, what's the default position that they start off in their conflict stories, and where do you help them navigate to?
So I think most conflicts are driven over a battle of who's hurt the most. So people compete to be the victim.
Yes.
Yeah. Which means my pain is more important than your pain, and we should be talking about my pain, and I don't want to listen to yours. So where do I start? Just start with listening. Yeah. And look, it's as old as how to win friends and influence people, and as modern as neuroscience. But if when you're listening to someone, you can repeat back in their own words what you've heard, they know you are listening, not just hearing. But the value, the thing that I love, the most important thing is to validate whether you agree or not with your position, the other person's position. If I can go get I get that's why you see things that way. That from your position, that you would see this issue as the priority, makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Produces trust.
Yeah.
And then we're not battling over hurt.
Yeah.
I get your pain. I'll tell you next about me.
Yes.
But I've just modelled exactly the way I want to talk to you, which is I will listen first in order to understand you and demonstrate it as a gift.
That I've heard you, yeah.
I've heard you. And this is what lovemaking is in couples, by the way.
Yeah.
But in business, it's also about, this is how I'm going to negotiate, and I'm not shifting from this position.
Yeah.
So I'm inviting you in. And if you don't play that game, now I have a lot of information about how you do work.
Yeah.
And if I've got to manage someone who's conflict-driven, whatever you do next will give me a lot of information. And, if I coached you, you'll know what to do
next.
to manage someone who is not going to play by the rules.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you very much for joining me today. It's been a fabulous conversation. I could talk for hours, but I will get in trouble with you.
Thank you for listening to the Seriously Social podcast. See our website for more details at www.socialmedia.aok.com.au/podcast. Check the show notes for credits, music used in the program, and more details about our guests.